wasn't supposed to be there that summer. The plan was to stay in the city, work doubles, save for fall rent. Then Mark texted that he'd found a cheap place near the reservoir. Something about an off-season deal because the water was low and the town didn't want tourists. He called it a get-out-of-your-head week. I said I didn't need that. He said I did. I said I couldn't afford it. He said he'd cover the difference, and I could spot him later. I said yes because I liked the idea of a week where my life wasn't a loop of buses and damp apartment hallways. I also said yes because of Cass. She and I hadn't talked much since the spring. Not a fight. Nothing that clear. Just that slow drift where everything you say lands a little crooked. She and Mark were together. I was okay with that. I told myself I was okay with that. We left on a Monday, which felt wrong. Vacations start on Fridays or Saturdays. Monday felt like skipping school. The highway shoulders were full of weeds that looked bleached. We drove with the windows down until the air became so hot it tasted like metal. From the back seat I watched the land flatten and brown. We passed the usual road trip scenery. Bent mailbox posts, a rusted swing set in a backyard with no grass, a dog staring at nothing, a diner sign with half the letters missing. I felt the week press out in front of us like a clean bed. It was me, Mark, his sister Joy, and Cass. 4 of us who had known each other long enough to remember each other with bad haircuts. The old group. In the car, we played a game. Name a person from high school and say what you think they're doing right now. Mark always said, in a parking garage, arguing about a boot on the wheel, which started as a joke and then turned into the only thing he could think to say. The reservoir sat where 3 small towns used to be. When they built the dam in the 70s, they cleared most of the houses and left the foundations to drown. You could look up old photos online. Churches, the brick school, a drugstore with an ice cream counter. There was a picture I kept going back to from freshman year when I found it during an insomnia spiral. It showed a group of kids in swimsuits on a dock, all caught laughing except for one boy who was looking down with a bad feeling on his face. That look had lodged in my head, a bad guess at the shape of the future. We turned off the highway and followed a 2-lane road into what used to be the valley. The air changed. It got thick and still. The sun was wrong in the sky, higher than it should have been by then. Or maybe that was just heat warping everything. The road curved along the edge of the reservoir, which wasn't a reservoir anymore. It was a wide bowl of cracked clay with a dark band around the rim, where the water line used to be. The old boat launch was a ramp ending in dry earth. A dock lay on its side, its metal cleats pointing at the sky. "Wow," Joy said, meaning it in a way that had no joy in it. She was the youngest of us, still in college, hair in a messy braid that kept dropping loops. She leaned forward between the front seats. "So we're like renting a dirt view?" "There's still water in the middle," Mark said. "Maybe they just didn't take the pictures from this angle." "You think the homeowner can push the water back in for us?" Cass said. Her voice carried that dry humor she used when she wanted to be anywhere else. For the past year, she'd been dressing in unfussy clothes like she was tired of managing her own reflection. I liked that about her. It made her seem less like she was performing all the time. We took the road down to the town. It wasn't a town so much as a few streets, a gas station, a hardware store, and a diner with a paper sign taped to the window. No water, cash only. At the end of the block was the house we rented, a one-story ranch with white siding and a squashed roof. The listing had called it Lakeside Bungalow. The lake part was a stretch now. The yard was all weeds and gravel. Someone had left a boat trailer under the carport with a flat tire that had sunk into the dirt. The porch had a swing, and under the swing sat a cracked blue cooler with a faded sticker on the lid. Take only what you need. Air conditioning? Joy asked before anything else. Should be, Mark said. He was already in host mode, as if paying made him responsible for the weather. He jangled the keys and grinned at me. See? Worth it. The front door stuck, but he got it open with a hard shoulder. Inside was the stale smell of a place that had been empty for a while. A bedsheet covered the TV. There was a rental binder on the coffee table with rules like do not use fireplace and please do not remove any historical artifacts, which was odd because the house had no fireplace and nothing that looked like an artifact. The air conditioner worked, a square unit in the living room wall that made a noise like an old fridge. We all stood in front of it at first, letting the cold spill on our faces. We dumped bags in the bedrooms and looked out the back window. The backyard sloped down into a field, and then a long stretch of dirt that used to be water. You could see where the reservoir had receded, pale curves like the lines inside a tree trunk. Out in the distance was the last of the lake, a mirror of dull metal under the white sun. Between us and it were dark squares set into the ground, foundations of the old town, some nearly flush with the clay, some standing like low walls. I saw a set of steps that led up to nothing, and another that led down to nothing. A rectangle of bricks with a patch of weeds growing in the middle like a private garden. A telephone pole in a place that made no sense. Creepy, Joy said, satisfied. We love creepy. It's weird to see everything naked like that, Cass said. Like when they drain a pool and the sides look too dry, and you can tell it's not supposed to be seen. If we die here, Mark said, please know I wanted to get the mountain place. You guys voted for beach. This isn't a beach, Joy said. It's beach adjacent, he said. It's a beach that's on leave. We laughed because it was easy, and it felt good to hold something lightly. The first afternoon was fine. We put our stuff away. The freezer had a bag of ancient ice cubes fused into one block, which we smashed on the sink. We found a deck of cards with 3 queens missing. We sat in the yard when the air cooled an inch and watched swifts arc through it like knife points. Bugs made their chorus, not high and soft like usual, but a low grinding noise, like a dozen small machines working in sync. Every few minutes I'd look at the reservoir and expect it to fill, as if wind could push water back. It didn't. We cooked pasta on a stove that tilted to one side. Mark poured a big bowl of chips and pretended to be offended if you took a handful instead of asking to be served. Joy learned how to open a bottle with a spoon, which she kept bringing up as if she'd just invented the spoon itself. The sunset came hard and fast. The sky went pink with a dirty undertone, and the field turned the color of old paper. The foundations out there looked like chess squares, except whatever game had been played here was long over. I went to bed early, because the drive had that strange tiring effect, where you're not doing anything but your body thinks you are. In the small bedroom, the bed mattress was just soft enough to not be comfortable. The ceiling fan clacked on every rotation, like it was counting itself to sleep. Through the window I could see the field and the pale slice of the last water. I watched it for a while. I told myself I was watching it because it was pretty, because the moon made a path across it that you could pretend was a road. That was a lie I knew even then. I was watching to make sure it didn't do anything. Somewhere in the night, I woke with the feeling that the house had changed shape around me. Nothing dramatic, just as if the hallway had stretched a bit and the walls had eased inward by the thickness of a sheet of paper. I sat up and listened, heard the fan clack, and then the air conditioner kick on, a cough and a shudder and then a steady breath. Heard something small moving in the walls. I looked at my phone, then put it down because I didn't want to know the time. I lay back and told myself about the next day. We'd go down and walk on the dry ground and see the old town. We'd find something good. A bottle cap, a coin. We'd be big kids on a field trip. We'd be fine. In the morning, we walked down. The field was full of those weeds that stick to your socks, and the ground beyond it kept a little give like something had been taken out of it. There were shards of green glass everywhere, rounded by years in water, and rusted bits of metal you couldn't place. A latch, a hinge, a hook from something important. We came to the first foundation, a rectangle of poured concrete filled with cracked earth. In one corner, a square of tile remained. White, flower pattern, a ghost of a bathroom. There was a nail sticking up from the floor that Joy warned us about twice. Somebody's mom yelled her lungs out in this room, Cass said, looking around. Somebody cried. Somebody got their first kiss. All of it's gone, and the only thing left is that dumb nail. Leave the nail alone, Mark said. I'm saying it seems like a bad deal, she said. We moved on. There were more foundations, and then the street itself lay revealed. Old asphalt with long scars running through it where the water had shifted and cracked it. A line of broken curbstones made a hard edge, and beyond that was clay carved smooth as the inside of a bowl. The clay had that pale, dry crust and darker patches where moisture still held. Our footprints made soft outlines that slowly filled in behind us. The light had that flat quality the sky gets in August where it acts like a lid. I saw the steps first. They rose out of the clay in a short flight, 6 or 7 of them, caked in pale dirt that flaked off underfoot. At the top, nothing, just air. The steps went up to the end of the world and stopped. From the front, it looked like a trick, like a prop in a stage play. But when you stood on top and looked out, it felt like a balcony with the house invisible around you. I went up and sat on the last step. The clay looked as if it had been smoothed by a hand. A few yards ahead, a square opening cut into the ground showed darkness. Not a well, not like that. More like a basement window sunk to ground level, half full of collapse. Don't, Cass said, which was fair because I was already moving toward it. I stopped. Joy knelt and flicked a small pebble into the opening. We waited to hear it hit. It did, but later than I expected, and not with a hard clack, more like a soft landing, like it had fallen into fabric. That's enough of that, Mark said. I am not explaining to the homeowner why there is a U-shaped hole in his insurance policy. We kept walking. Out farther, the reservoir fell away into a deeper bowl where the last of the water collected. On the slope between those was a pale rectangle that caught the light. It looked like tile again. I felt a prickle run down my arms that wasn't from the heat. We went to it. It turned out to be a small platform with a short set of steps leading down into the ground. Only the soil around it had eroded so the steps were exposed. I recognized something like the entry to a cellar from old houses I grew up around. Doors long gone, the passage exposed to everything. The air above it felt cooler. That drew us more than anything. "Hello?" Joy called, as if we were at a store and wanted to make sure it was open. "Yeah, try not to wake the dead," Cass said. "Or a raccoon," Mark added. He bent down and put his face near the opening, and then jerked back with a laugh. "Kidding. No raccoons. You should have seen your faces." "Huh," Joy said in a way that meant she had seen them and didn't like what she saw. I looked down. Stairs went along one wall and turned. A trickle of water glistened along a groove, catching light like silver wire. It smelled like wet stone and something faintly sour. My hands felt empty, and I only realized then that I wanted something to hold. A flashlight, a stick, anything, the way a kid wants a blanket. We didn't have any of that. We had phones daylight drunk from heat. "I want to go down," I said before I could try out the words in my head. My voice didn't sound like a person trying to be brave. It sounded like someone who wanted to scratch an itch that had been building for a decade. "Of course you do," Cass said. "Of course you do." "I'll go with you," Mark said. "Joy, you stay with Cass. If we scream, call the police." "Or your mom," Joy said. "Maybe she can talk the basement down." "Just give us a minute," I said. "We won't go far." We did not have rope. We did not have a plan. We had poor judgment and the kind of friendship where you agree to things because it would be too much work to argue. We went down sideways, feet finding the edges, a hand on the crumbly wall. The temperature dropped 2 degrees every step. When we turned the corner, we saw it was a room, square, with a low ceiling, the kind of space made to keep fruit through winter. The walls were rough, coated with that thick plaster people used before paint was cheap. There were shelves built into the corners, fallen in rounded piles like collapsed cakes. On the far wall, high up, a small window was set. The glass in it was black from the inside, like it had been painted or charred. I took my phone out and turned on the flashlight. The white circle jumped and shook in my hand because my hand was shaking. That annoyed me. The beam landed on a shape on the floor. It was just a chair, the simple kind with 4 slats in the back. But something about seeing a chair there made the room more real, like it was waiting for someone to sit in it. Beside the chair, a big ceramic jar lay on its side with its mouth broken. Inside was a smell like old pickles, the ghost of vinegar. "It's nothing," Mark said, even as he looked with his eyebrows up like he was giving the room one last chance to be something. "It's a cellar." There were marks on the wall. I raised the light. At first I thought it was cracks or water stains. It wasn't. It was writing, scratched into the plaster with something dull. The letters were crooked. Some words doubled back on themselves, letter on letter. The language wasn't a language. It was more like a list written by someone who didn't want anyone to read it, or by someone who had no one else to talk to. "What does it say?" Mark asked. "It says somebody spent time down here," I said. "It says no one told them to stop." I stepped closer and ran my fingers a hair above the wall. Some letters were shallow, some dug deep. The deep ones had small curls of plaster at their edges that were still white, as if whoever did this had done it after the water dropped, after the wet had gone. Fresh wasn't the right word. Newer than the others. It bothered me that the writing had layers. "Okay," Mark said. "We've seen enough of this little nightmare den." "Wait," I said. I moved the light along the wall. In one place, all the scratches became one shape that wasn't letters. It was a ladder drawn without skill or care. 8 rungs, one rung thicker than the rest. Mark was silent. He had that stillness he got when he was trying to make a joke in his head and couldn't. I didn't say that the ladder reminded me of the steps outside. I didn't say anything because I wanted it to be nothing. A small sound came from above, not loud, not a voice. Something shifting. I felt the impulse to go very quiet, as if the thing that made the noise could only find you if you answered back. Mark had the same impulse. I felt it in the way his shoulder moved. We stood like that for a minute that stretched longer than a minute. Then I laughed. It sounded wrong. I said, "Probably joy moving around." Mark took a breath like he'd been underwater. "Probably a squirrel." "I'm going up." "Take this," I said, and handed him my phone. The light made his face flatten. He climbed. I waited below with the chair and the jar and the dumb ladder that meant nothing. A drip landed near my shoe and made a small dark star on the clay floor. I thought about one of those posters with a cat on a tree branch that says, "Hang in there." I pictured it wedged in this room, going damp and curling. The image made me feel angry, for reasons I didn't want to unpack. Mark called down, "Weird," in a measured voice that meant he wanted to not say more until later. "Come up." I did. At the top of the stairs, I blinked into the light and then saw what he meant. Our footprints on the clay slope had gone messy, not washed away, just blurred from the edges inward. New small tracks crossed them. Not animal tracks, not those neat prints with pads and nails. These were like little smears, if someone had walked on their heels and dragged their toes. There were a lot of them, a scatter. They started near the cellar opening and went outward, down the slope. I counted them without wanting to. 10, 12, 15. Then I stopped because counting felt like an invitation. "Wind," Mark said. "It's wind." "Wind doesn't make marks," I said. "Okay, mudfall," he said. "A kid. I don't know." Before we could argue our way to a truce, Joy called down from farther on the slope. "Come see this." We followed her voice, squinting. The ground gave a little under each step like bread crust. The sunlight seemed to be made of dust. We found Joy and Cass standing by a post that stuck out of the ground. It was a phone pole, the kind that would usually carry lines, except no lines now. On the pole, at our height, was a small metal box with a crank. The box door was open. Inside was a black mouthpiece, the kind from old movies, and a metal hook for the receiver that was empty. The crank had a wooden handle polished by hands. "Oh, what?" Mark said, delighted. "We found the hotline." "It's like one of those forest cabin things," Joy said. "In case of fire, call this number." She peered behind the pole. There were no wires, only a path where a wire once ran, a faint groove in the wood. "How does it ring without, the world attached?" "It doesn't," Cass said. "It's just trash that looks like a toy." "It's cute," Joy said, and reached for the crank. "Don't," Cass and I said at the same time. Joy pulled her hand back like the handle had bitten her. She gave us a look I recognized from when she was 10 and didn't like being told what to do. She put her hands in her pockets and rocked on her heels. We're not allowed to play with the dead phone. Got it. Mark reached up and spun the crank twice in a quick jaunt, because he couldn't help himself. The handle made a small wooden click each turn, and the box hummed in a way that might have been real, or just our brains making sense of it. We all stared. Nothing happened. He tried again. 1, 2, 3. Click, click, click. Nothing. Just the sound of heat, like a room full of bees. See? He said. Nothing. Okay, Cass said. Now let's go find literally anything else to look at. We started back, up the slope, panting in that dull way you do when heat has turned the air thick. I looked over my shoulder. The small smeared track marks seemed closer to where we had been a minute ago. I decided it was a trick of focus. I decided not to mention it. Back at the house, I drank 3 glasses of water without tasting it. The tap ran brown for a second, and then gave up a decent stream. The rental binder had a note: boil before drinking. We had already drunk. I didn't say anything. After lunch, Joy wanted to drive into the next town to find a thrift store. Mark wanted to find a bait shop, even though we had no rods, because he liked the cultural content of bait shops. Cass said she had a headache and wanted to lie down. That left me hovering awkwardly. I said I'd stay with Cass. It made sense. The way her voice sounded when she said headache told me it wasn't the kind you sleep off. It was the kind you use as a shield. When they drove away, the house got silent in a way that was almost loud. I stood in the kitchen doorway, unsure of where to be. Cass lay on the couch with one arm over her eyes. The air conditioner did its cough shutter thing and then hunted down a temperature. "You don't have to watch me nap," she said. "I can do other tricks," I said. "I can stare at the wall." She moved her arm and looked at me with no expression. Then she smiled a little. "Sit down," she said. I sat on the floor with my back to the couch. I could feel her hand close to my hair, not touching it. We didn't speak for a while. The sound of the house made a map. Fridge, fan, something ticking, the small click of the cooling oven. Outside, a car went by. When sound came back, it felt placed intentionally. "Do you like it here?" she asked, not meaning the house. "It's new," I said. "It's old," she said. "New to me," I said. "It feels like someone took a picture of a place and then built the picture." "You always say stuff like that," she said, amused, not mean. "Like the world is a description of itself." "Sorry," I said, and I was. Not for the sentence, but for wanting to show her that I thought things. "I'll say what I mean. I like being here with you." She was quiet. Then, "I know." She didn't say she liked being here with me. I told myself that was okay. She drifted. I read the binder. It had a page about the reservoir with dates and short facts. Built in 1974. Maximum depth 60 feet, now 25. Fish, bass, perch, carp. Warning about sudden drop-offs along the shore. It mentioned the towns that used to be here, and that the cemetery had been moved before the flood. That was supposed to make people feel better. I pictured a backhoe lifting a coffin and setting it down like a suitcase. From the couch, Cass murmured and turned. Her fingers grazed my shoulder. The touch surprised me, and more than that, I felt how much I wanted it. Something in my chest did a small, embarrassing twist. I put my hand on the floor. I knew better. I wasn't going to be that person. But I also wasn't a saint. The thought of leaving the room felt like a punishment for a crime I hadn't committed yet. The air conditioner coughed and went off. Silence swelled. From the backyard came that bug chorus again, the machine grinding sound. It seemed too steady to be made by living things. I stood and went to the back window. The field lay flat and pale. The dark band around the reservoir rim looked like a bruise. In the middle, the last of the water looked changed. It could have been light. It could have been nothing. But it looked like a stain spreading under the surface. On the kitchen counter sat the cracked blue cooler from the porch. We'd brought it in because it was sad to leave it out there with that old sticker. I flipped the lid. Inside were a few items someone had left behind. A pair of cheap sunglasses with one arm taped, a folded paper map in a plastic bag, a bottle opener shaped like a fish, and a small notebook with a plaid cover. I picked up the notebook. It had that soft feel of paper that's gotten damp and dried a few times. The first pages were empty. Then writing began a dozen pages in, small and tight, like the person didn't want to be noticed taking up space. I didn't want to be the person who reads someone else's notes in the house they're borrowing. I opened it anyway. The entries didn't have dates, just lines. They weren't even entries so much as fragments, lists of what they'd seen walking on the dry ground, a ceramic doll head, a padlock, the kiosk with the payphone still there but sometimes gone. I paused at that and reread. The entry went on. Sometimes we go back and it isn't there until you don't try to see it, and then it is there. Jay says it is like a trick of light. I think it has more rules than that. Then, heard the ringing. Didn't answer. Felt it in my teeth. Then a grocery list unrelated. Then a note that said, "Do not take anything." Underlined twice. I sat down at the table. The notebook open like a new friend you worry you shouldn't trust. I thought about the phone crank. I thought about Mark spinning it. I thought about the smeared prints. I thought about the cellar and its writing, new and old. I closed the notebook and put it back. I am superstitious about the wrong things. I will ignore a warning sign and then avoid stepping on a crack, like I believe the sidewalk is a god. When Mark and Joy came back, they had a plastic bag with 3 mismatched mugs and a set of postcards that looked original to the 60s. The mugs had slogans like "World's Okayest Fisherman." Mark was pleased with his haul and kept lining up the mugs in different orders to see if the captions made a good sentence. Joy held up a plush dog she had bought and said, "Meet Sheriff," because she and the dog both liked the name. "One time I fell asleep in the car and woke up to you having bought a dog," Cass said, and it sounded like a memory from when they had been happy. Then she smiled, real this time, and asked about the thrift store smell. That evening we brought chairs into the backyard and watched darkness soak the field. The sound of bugs thickened. We passed around a bottle. Sheriff sat in Joy's lap like a talisman. The stars came out. Out on the dry slope, a light showed for a second, like a lighter flicked in cupped hands. It went out. No one said anything at first because it could have been anything. Glass catching a glint, a plane, a trick. Then it flashed again, farther to the right. Short bursts, long pause, short. It had that annoying certainty of a signal made by a person. "Nope," Joy said, fluffing the plush dog's ears. "I want to know what that is," Mark said, which in his language meant I'm going to go find out. "It's kids," Cass said. "Kids doing kid stuff." There aren't kids here, Mark said. Then it's bored men with beer and flashlights, she said. Which is worse? We didn't go. We watched the flashes repeat, change place each time, as if whoever was making them couldn't decide which direction we'd be in. After a while, they stopped. The bugs kept singing at their machine pitch. A breeze came across the baked ground and carried a smell with it. Wet cardboard, dead leaves, the damp bottom of things. It made me think of the cellar. It made me think of the jar. I finished the bottle and did not feel drunk. I felt a new tiredness setting up camp in the back of my head. When I went to bed, I put the notebook from the cooler under my pillow, in a way I told myself was for safekeeping, as if someone was going to break in and steal it to protect the town's secrets. In the late night, if it was late, I woke with my heart running fast. The house did not feel like a house. It felt like a box. I didn't get up. I listened. In the far distance came a tiny sound like a bell, not sweet, thin, like a wire hit with a small piece of metal. It came again. There were long spaces between them that made the next one worse. I lay there counting steps between them, and then telling myself not to count anything. When I fell asleep, I did it the way you trip on a curb. In the morning, the water looked farther away. It might not have been. The sun was higher, the light harsher, but the dark band around the rim of the bowl seemed thicker. It gave me a dumb thought that someone had gone in during the night and scooped out more. At breakfast, we made eggs that tasted like the pan. Joy cut her toast wrong and threw both halves away. The air felt like it was quietly full of smoke, even though the sky was clear. We decided to take the car and drive around the reservoir on the service road. We needed to get a sense of place. That was how Mark put it. It sounded grown up. We drove past the dam. Its concrete face had a sunburned look. A sign warned of sudden water release. That felt like a good joke someone had told the sign. On the other side, a chain-link fence had ribbons tied to it. Yellow, white, red. Some had writing, names, dates. I didn't read them. Reading someone's name like that feels like using it without permission. The service road was in bad shape, full of big potholes that the water had been nursing. We bumped along. On the far side, we found what looked like part of the old main street, only higher. The bones of it were similar. Curbstone, squares of foundation. Here, a section of pavement rose in a hump where roots had tried to matter underwater. At the end of that street was a small building half sunk with its roof still on, like a person falling into a pool who changes their mind and tries to climb back out. On the wall, a faded painted sign read, "Groceries," the letters big and cheerful in a style that looked like it had known better days, even when it was new. We got out. The heat made a visible shimmer over the clay. Bees or wasps had taken over the old awning. We moved slow like you do when you're being watched by insects. Mark tugged on the door out of habit. It gave, a little. The inside had dried to a husk. Shelves fell sideways. A calendar hung from a nail with all its months stuck together. On the counter was a glass jar with dark shapes inside that had once been candy. The jar's lid had welded itself to the ring with corrosion. "I keep wanting to put things back," Joy said. "Like if I stack a shelf straight, it'll figure out how to be a store again." "This whole place is like an attic," Cass said. "It only makes sense if you know it from before, and even then it doesn't." I walked behind the building. In the shade, it was cooler by 1 degree. There were handprints on the wall at about waist height. as if someone had stood there and pressed their hands to the paint to steady themselves. The prints were not old. The edges were clean. It looked like they had been made by someone pressing clean hands on a dirty surface and lifting the dirt off, leaving the prints lighter. I put my hand over one and matched it. The size was close. It made my skin itch. "Guys," I said, but not loudly. Just enough that it could be a call or a question. They came around the corner. We looked at the prints. We looked at each other. No one wanted to say anything that would make them into evidence of something. "I think people come here at night and mess around," Mark said. "Teens, weird older guys, TikTokers with tripods." "TikTokers with tripods," Joy said. "That's not a thing anyone has ever called anyone." "It should be," he said. We didn't stay long. We walked to the car with that feeling you get in a place you can't define. A small tug behind your knee, a shift in the air pressure in your ear, a sudden hunger for something sweet. When we drove off, a small cloud of dust rose, and then settled back down like everything we did here wanted to leave no trace. Back at the house, we made a plan to go out to the last water and swim. Because what else do you do on a summer week near a lake that has lost most of its lake? We packed towels and a bottle of sunscreen that had separated into layers, and an apple that looked good and tasted like flour. Joy brought Sheriff. Cass brought the notebook from the cooler without telling me she had. I saw the corner of it in her bag and recognized my own bad impulse. The sky had that colorless quality that makes your eyes feel tired. The walkout was worse in the afternoon. The clay surface broke and stuck to our shoes, then fell off in flakes that made it look like we were shedding. We reached the edge of the remaining water. The lip of it had a thin band of mud that had the texture of mousse cake and the same wrong sweetness smell. Beyond that, the water went dark quicker than you would think. If you squinted, you could see objects just under the surface, indiscriminate shapes with edges softened by water. A wheel, a length of pipe, something like a book that wasn't. The surface had a skin. "I want to say we shouldn't," Joy said, already rolling up her shorts. "We're doing it for the story," Mark said. "Also because we're hot." Cass stood with her hands on her hips and stared at the water as if she could make it better by deciding it was. Then she took off her shirt, and the look on my face must have changed because she raised an eyebrow without smiling. "Eyes up," she said, which made me feel 16. I went in last. The mud tried to eat my feet and then gave up. The water was cold in a surprising way, like the shade inside a church. It closed over my knees and then my hips, and then I was in it, and it was around me, and hundreds of small things I didn't want to think about touched my skin. I told myself it was grass. I told myself it was nothing. I swam out 3 strokes and felt the water go colder again. The heat of the day pressed down on the top of my head, and this cold came up from below, a layer cake of temperature. I floated and looked at the sky and felt like a piece of fruit in gelatin. Joy splashed me. "Don't think about corpses," she said, and I laughed because I hadn't been thinking about corpses until she said it. Mark dove and came up with his hair slicked back like a seal. He felt around with his feet and announced an underwater shelf and then a drop-off. "Don't go past me," he said, serious for once. He kept one hand out to block us, as if he could hold us back if the lake decided to become an ocean. I swam in a small circle and looked at the shore. The field and the house looked like a model of themselves. Farther along, a pale shape lay at the edge of the water. A deer, I thought, and then saw the angles were wrong. It was a refrigerator, the door off, the shelves out, the shell half sunk in slime. I thought about groceries and the jar of candy. I thought about the cellar and the writing and how deep the scratches went. I told myself to think about chips instead. We didn't stay long. The water tasted faintly of metal. When we got out, a ring of mud stayed around our ankles until we walked it off. My towel picked up a smell I would spend the rest of the week trying to get out by leaving it in the sun. Sheriff the plush dog got a smear on his ear that Joy treated like an injury. On the way back, we passed the pole with the crank phone again. It looked different, not in a way you could name, more in how it seemed to lean. The box door was closed now when we had left it open. That could have been the wind. The crank, which had pointed up before, now pointed down. That could have been us misremembering. We were tired. We were full of lake. We sat on the porch swing and let ourselves dry. The swing creaked on every forward motion. Cars went by less than the first day. The paper sign at the diner door had gotten a new strip of tape across the top. I ate the flower apple. It was bad, and I ate it anyway because throwing it away felt like a kind of disrespect. In the late afternoon, a man walked by on the opposite side of the street. He was old, or maybe sunburn had done the thing it does where it erases ages and leaves a generic weathered face. He wore a cap and a shirt with the sleeves cut off and carried a plastic bag that looked empty. He glanced at our house and then away with the practiced look of someone who won't interfere with tourists. Then he stopped and turned and said to us, "You're not supposed to take anything." He said it like a greeting, the way some people say, "Beautiful day." We didn't, Mark said. "Good," the man said. "You're not supposed to take anything." It knows he nodded once like he had done his part and then kept walking. He didn't turn back. He didn't wait for us to ask what knows. He vanished behind the diner and then came out the other side and then didn't exist anymore for us. Joy made a face. "Okay," she said. "I'm never sleeping again." "He's messing with us," Mark said, but he didn't sound convinced. "Locals love messing with vacationers." "We're not vacationers," Cass said. "We're idiots borrowing a house from a guy who should have taken his listing down months ago." That night I couldn't settle. We grilled things on the stovetop and called it a barbecue because saying it out loud made it feel like a different meal. We played cards badly with the deck that had lost queens. We gave 3 jacks crown duties. The air conditioner wheezed and the fan clacked and the bugs sang and the world did its small daily theater. When I went to the bedroom, I stood in the doorway for a while with the light on, because the arrangements of furniture you already know can still look like a person when you are tired. I lay down and pulled the notebook from under the pillow and opened it to the middle. The handwriting made little tunnels for my eyes to go through. A line said, "I meant to follow the calls, but M said no." And another line said, "If you go down the same stairs twice, hold your breath the second time." Then, we were in the water when we heard it last. Felt it in the jaw. Heard it from 2 directions. Then a drawing of the ladder, childish, 8 rungs, 1 thick. I closed the notebook and put it on the floor. I told myself I would sleep with my face toward the window so I'd see morning come. I woke to the bell sound again. It wasn't a bell, really. It was more like a thought getting pinched. The distance was hard to tell. It could have been out at the water. It could have been in the next room. It came in a pattern that wasn't a pattern, like someone trying to remember a song they only half knew. I waited for it to stop so I could sleep. It did. And then I couldn't. In the morning, Mark told us all to put anything we'd found back. He said it like a joke, but with the warning in it. We looked at each other with pockets turned out, backs of shelves opened, bags upended. Joy had a coin that had turned her fingers green. Cass had a piece of blue glass that she said she wanted to keep because she had a jar at home with one from every beach. I had nothing but the notebook, which I shouldn't have, which I didn't mention, which felt like a hot thing in the next room. We walked down together and did the opposite of a treasure hunt. Joy placed the coin on a concrete slab and then changed her mind and tucked it between two cracks. Cass, after a minute, set the glass on top of the cellar steps like a small blue watchman. We stood there like people at a grave who don't know whether they're supposed to speak. The air smelled the way it smells before a storm that isn't coming, pushed down, metallic. "Feel better?" Mark asked. "No," Joy said. We started for the phone pole. I don't know why. It felt like the place where you go to see if things are going to get worse. The box door was open again. The crank pointed up. The handle looked wet, but wasn't. There was a new thing, too. A thin thread running into the box from the back. A line that looked like a spider had spun a cable and hid it out of shyness. I touched it lightly, and it felt real, like fishing line, taut enough to hum. It ran down the back of the pole and into the ground. "Do not," Cass said, and I didn't. Then the best and worst thing happened. The box made a sound, a small metallic buzz, and then a ring that was dry and thin and short, and then another. It didn't sound like a phone ringing. It sounded like something pretending to be a phone. None of us moved, as if any motion would make the moment choose a side. The ringing stopped. The silence afterward felt very clean. "Okay," Mark said. "That's a fun trick," which was his way of handing a thought back to the world it came from. "Don't answer it," Joy said. "It didn't ask me to," he said. "Don't answer it," Cass said again. She was not looking at the phone. She was looking at me. I said, "Let's go." And for once everyone listened. We went back to the house. The diner across the street had its door open and a fan going. The sign in the window had gained another line. "No water, cash only. Open when we feel like it." Inside, a woman wiped the counter with a towel that looked like it had wiped this counter for 20 years. She didn't look at us when we went in. We ordered coffee and eggs. The eggs tasted better than ours, even though they were the same eggs. Coffee is always best when you don't know where it came from. The woman poured refills in a practiced way that made you grateful for small, knowable things. Joy asked, "What's with the lake?" and then made a face at her own question. The woman shrugged and said it was always like this sometimes. She said the drought got worse every few years, and then better every other few years, and no one learned anything, and no one died that didn't have other reasons. She pushed the sugar toward us. The same two men sat at the end of the counter you find in every place like this, talking about a truck like it was a person. On the wall was a photo of the lake from a good year, full and blue. A man on a jet ski cutting a white wake. All of it now a picture of someone else's place. I asked her, because I had to, about the phone pole. She made a face like she had tasted something sour. She said it was only a thing left over. She said some of the old wiring still ran under the whole valley, like veins that still think they're hooked up to a heart. She said the box rang sometimes if the wind was right, or if the air was wrong. She said if you answered it, sometimes nothing happened, and sometimes you heard a lot of words you didn't want to know if someone had said. I asked what the words were. She said she wouldn't repeat them. I knew better than to ask again. "Don't take anything," she added when we paid. She gave us our change with that sentence tucked under it. Then she turned away and wiped the counter some more. After breakfast, we went back to the house. Mark pretended to nap. Joy actually napped. Cass sat on the floor by the coffee table and flipped through the postcards. I stood. I have always been someone who stands when sitting is obvious. My stomach hurt like I had swallowed a handful of small rocks. I went to the back window again, as if the lake had new answers. The last water lay farther than yesterday. I wanted to say it was my imagination, but the band where it used to be had a new edge, like a fingernail had drawn a line overnight. The sound of bugs seemed louder. The air felt dull. I like dull. I didn't like this. In the afternoon, clouds came together in a way they hadn't all week. They made the light go gray. It felt good like a hand on a fevered forehead. We took it as a sign to go out again. We went back to the cellar because we were stupid, and because if your day starts with a strange ringing, you want to end it with something you can name. The steps were the same, and so was the coolness, and so was the room. The chair had moved. Not far, just a few inches, enough to show a clean crescent under one leg where it had been sitting a long time. I felt that deep, simple fear that children have when the doll is not where they remember it. Mark said, "Nope," with a clipped laugh, which is what he says when he sees the edge of a cliff and wants to put a fence around it with sound. Joy leaned close to the wall with the scratches and took a photo with her phone. The flash made the plaster glow. Later, we would look at the picture, and it would look fine. Here, now, it was different. The newer scratches were clearer than yesterday. They weren't longer. They weren't deeper. They were just there in a way they hadn't been, like a person who decides to stand up straighter around you. We came back up, and the air felt like a relief that was too quick. I tried to joke that we had now seen the whole underground scene and could tell our grandkids about it. Nobody laughed. Clouds moved overhead and made the light change in steps. Bright, dim, as if someone was adjusting a switch. The crank phone stood out on the slope. From here it looked like a toy on a playmat, a model of a thing that had never really worked. It didn't ring. That should have made it better. It didn't. We were halfway back when we heard a splash from the last water. Not a big splash, like a hand hitting the surface and then being pulled away fast. We turned our heads, because that is what our bodies do with sound. The water was still. 3 rings moved outward. The middle ring was almost gone by the time the outer one touched the bank. I waited for a fish to jump. The water said nothing. We got back to the porch. The air had the smell that comes before rain. I wanted rain the way you want a friend to show up at a party you regret attending. We waited. It didn't come. The wind moved a paper on the coffee table and then set it back down. By evening, I didn't want to go to bed. I didn't want to sit. I wanted an event to put the day into a box labeled with a noun. Instead, the light went out of the sky, and the bugs did their mechanics, and the phone did not ring, and the four of us became small in the house, in a way I didn't like to admit. We decided to watch a movie, one of the discs from the stack the owner had left. Joy picked a comedy that would have been fine any other place. Here, the laughter on the soundtrack sounded like it had been recorded under different weather and shipped to us. We turned it off. "I can't be here and not think about being here," Cass said, which was exactly it. We went to bed early as if to trick the night into going faster. I put the notebook under the pillow again because I am dumb and superstitious and desperate all at once. I lay on my side and watched the thin curtain breathe with the night air. I could not tell when I fell asleep. I could tell when I woke. The thin sound, the wire bell, near, then far, then near again, then a pause long enough that you thought you were safe, then it again like a finger on a glass. I got up. I did not turn on the light because I didn't want the house to look at me. I went through the living room past the couch where Mark had said he might sleep and then obviously didn't. I put my hand on the front doorknob and then, because I wasn't completely gone, I let go and went to the back door instead. I eased it open. The bug sound came in like a wall had fallen. The field lay in a shallow glow. Out on the slope, where the phone was, a point of pale light shone the way a cigarette end does in a movie when a person waits in the dark. It was not a cigarette. It was the metal handle of the crank, catching what there was of the porch light. It moved. Up, down, up. Slow. Not like a person wanting to make a phone ring. Like a person following a motion they had seen somewhere long ago and were trying to copy. I stepped out onto the porch without wanting to. The boards creaked and the sound flew out over the field and came back with itself. The crank moved again. The box made the small, almost ring. I knew I was going to walk down there. I don't know what I would tell you I knew if you had stopped me and made me swear. I put my hand on the rail and went down the steps into the weeds and then into the clay. Halfway to the pole behind me, the porch light went out. The bugs didn't care. My eyes adjusted like brave little workers. The crank moved and the box made its sound, and each time it did I walked a few steps, and then I'd stop because stopping felt like I was in charge, and then I'd go again because not going felt like a decision I couldn't live with. When I reached the pole, I stood with my breath loud in my head. The crank hung still. The box looked old again, not like a mouth or a threat, just like an object with a job from another time. The door was closed. I reached up because I was going to open it, because my hand wasn't me anymore. And then from the dark behind me a soft voice said, "Don't." And I turned. Cass was there, a shape at first and then a person. She wore Mark's hoodie over shorts, and she had bare feet which made me hurt in my feet. She shook her head once. I dropped my hand. We stood there like we were trying not to wake a dog that wasn't sleeping. The crank moved on its own, the handle traveling a few inches, and then releasing back like something had a hold of it on the other side, and forgot for a second that physics was in play. I heard another sound then, low and faint. Not the bugs, not the bell. The sound a person makes when they want to be heard but not by a specific person. A soft call that wasn't a word. It came from the direction of the water. I don't know why, but the hair on my forearm stood up. Cass reached out and took my wrist and didn't say anything, and I would have followed her anywhere that second because it felt like the only decision left that belonged to us. We moved backward together, eyes on the pole like you keep your eyes on a dog you don't know. When we reached the yard, The porch light came back on as if a hand had released a switch. We went up. Inside, in the living room, we stood and breathed and then laughed in the way that just empties out tension and doesn't mean you think anything is funny. Cass let go of my wrist and rubbed her eyes with her knuckles like a kid after a car ride. "You were going to answer it," she said. It wasn't a question. "I wanted to make it stop," I said. "Or start. I don't know." "You never know," she said, but not unkindly. We went to the kitchen because the human thing to do is get water. The tap ran brown and then cleared. She drank from her cupped hand. I watched her do it and thought about the part of my brain that would always want to follow the sound instead of the person, and felt a mean sadness about myself. She set the glass down and looked at me like she had decided something and then decided not to say it. We stood there a little longer in the bright kitchen. Every room felt like a stage waiting for actors. We went back to our rooms without saying goodnight. Saying goodnight would have implied something like a promise. When I slept, I dreamt of the cellar. The ladder on the wall was a real ladder now, and the 8th rung, the thick one, was made of glass. I climbed it and felt the rung flex under my weight. In the dream, I knew for sure I would fall, and when I reached the top, I saw that the small window was not a window at all, but a mouth of black water, and that if I went through it, I would come up in the reservoir, and that everyone would be on the shore pretending not to see me drowning, because they didn't want to drown too. I woke up angry at those dream people, and found my face wet with the kind of sweat that feels like it doesn't belong to you. The next day was the last day we had said we would stay. That was the first sentence I thought in the morning. The last day, like a bell, like a fact that had a shape. The water looked even farther gone. The sky had that washed-out look that makes you want to clean your hands. The diner sign had lost one strip of tape, and the paper lifted and dropped in the warm breeze. Mark made pancakes badly and burned the first 3, and swore softly each time as if he were trying out different swear words for fit. Joy asked what we wanted to do, and no one said the words we were thinking, which were leave now. Instead, we said things like, walk one more time and check the other side, and get ice cream if we found a place that still had power. The air held on to sound in a new way, like a room after someone stops singing. We laced our shoes and stepped out and went down the backyard and into the dried bowl, which was all we had learned to do here. Walk into the empty and hope it let us out again. We did not make it as far as the cellar this time. On the way there, we saw the same pole with the crank and the same box and the same thin thread going into the ground, except now there were more threads. 2, 3. Faint lines the color of clear water, running from the back of the box in different directions along the surface of the clay, vanishing into it here and there, and reappearing like veins on the back of a hand. I kneeled and touched one. It was not fishing line. It wasn't spider silk. It was something that didn't have a good name. It felt like guitar string and tendon and nylon rope all at once. It hummed when I plucked it, and the hum went out under the ground in that direction, and did not come back. I hate this, Joy said, and I loved her in that moment because she had given us the one right sentence. It's nothing, Mark said, then stopped. I mean, it's kids. Wires, prank stuff. Pranks are supposed to be funny, Cass said. I'm not laughing. We followed one of the lines because we are dumb when presented with lines. It ran along the surface like it was both part of the ground and not. It led us to a square foundation with a tree growing in the middle of it that had never seen water and had no right to be alive. The line went into the wall, and then out the other side, and then down a set of stairs like a pet snake, and then into the darkness. The air was cooler there, and it felt like when you open the door to a walk-in cooler, and you know you are taking more than cold out of it. "I'm not going down there," Joy said. "Good," I said. "That's the dumbest thing we could do." Mark looked at me over his shoulder as if he were relieved to be told that. Cass had the notebook in her bag, and I could feel it like a heat source. A small movement in the corner of my eye turned me, and I saw a figure on the far slope near the drowned water. A person walking, then not walking, then walking again in short bursts, like someone translating a dream into the ground. I blinked. They weren't there. When I blinked again, they were farther along, not closer to us, closer to the last water. I put my hand to my mouth without meaning to. I didn't say anything because the words to put that image into someone else's head felt like a gift I didn't want to give. We turned back. We told each other we needed to pack. We said we'd sweep the kitchen and leave the mugs clean and the sheets in a pile, because being good guests is what you do when you can't be anything else. We walked up the yard and onto the porch. The swing looked the same. The cracked cooler sat where we'd left it. The sticker said, "Take only what you need." I lifted the lid as if someone had added more rules. Inside, on top of the items that had been there since we arrived, sat something new. The blue glass shard that Cass had put at the top of the cellar steps. It lay on the plaid notebook like a paperweight, as if holding it down. The piece of glass shouldn't have been there. I had seen Cass place it on the top step myself. The way it sat now, on the notebook like a little blue lid, made my stomach cold. "We put that back," Cass said. She didn't move closer. She kept her hands at her sides like you do when you don't want to touch a hot pan by accident. "I put that back." Joy picked up Sheriff and held him tight to her ribs. "So it came home," she said, "like a dog." "Cool. Love that for us." "It's a trick," Mark said, but he didn't have the weight he needed behind the word. "Someone saw us. Someone's messing." "Who?" Cass asked. "There is no who here." Inside the house, the air conditioner coughed and then fell silent and didn't come back. Heat slipped into the living room with the casual speed of a person who knows the door code. We stood in the porch doorway and didn't cross it. I could hear a fly somewhere in the kitchen, a steady tapping against glass. I opened the cooler and moved the glass to the side and took out the notebook. It felt heavier than it should. The paper edges were softened from all the time someone had carried it damp and then let it dry. I turned a few pages. The handwriting was the same, small and tight. There was a line I hadn't seen. "If it returns what you leave, you left the wrong thing." Under that, a drawing of a square with a smaller square inside it, like a window. The inner square had a line through it, like a mouth open and closed. I put the notebook back. I didn't like that it had been waiting. "Let's pack," I said. The words made me feel better simply because they were a plan in a sentence. "We'll leave. We'll go to that motel by the highway, the one with the green sign. We'll eat fries and watch a dumb show. We'll go home tomorrow." "Yes," Joy said fast. "Sure," Mark said, which was as close to a yes as I needed from him. Cass looked at me a second longer, and then said yes too. She picked up the blue glass and put it back on top of the notebook, as if the act of arranging things in a neat way might be noticed by whatever was keeping score here. We went inside and started moving. It was an ugly kind of packing. We didn't care if shirts got folded or if shoes went into bags that matched. We threw things into piles and then those piles into bags. I left the sheets how the binder said to leave them. I wiped the counter with a damp paper towel that collected a lot of brown in one pass. When I pushed the trash down in the can, something brushed my knuckles from the other side, soft and quick. I jerked back and told myself it was a strip of bag. I tied it and carried it outside and set it on the porch, because I didn't want to go farther. When I came back in, the fly had stopped its window tapping. I didn't see it anywhere. The air conditioner still hadn't returned. The house had a new sound now, very low, like a hum inside the walls. I stood still and felt it in my teeth the way some people can feel a train before it arrives. It wasn't constant. It came and went like a slow breath. Joy dragged her rolling bag down the hallway. The wheels made a small knocking rhythm over the doorway lips. She kept the plush dog under her armpit like he could help with balance. Mark carried 2 duffels and made a joke about his gym membership paying off, and the words just fell through the room. Cass shut the kitchen drawers she had opened, and then opened them again to make sure nothing was left behind. I checked the bedrooms one more time because I know the exact pain of leaving a charger and an outlet when a place already feels wrong. When we had everything in the living room, we stood there and looked at it like it might decide not to belong to us. The hum inside the walls came again, longer this time. The lights flickered once in a way that would have been normal in a thunderstorm and felt out of place under a clear sky. The 4 of us looked up like a dog does when it hears a note you don't. "Let's go," I said. I grabbed a bag and headed for the door before any of us had time to talk ourselves out of moving quickly, but not running. We made it to the porch. The heat outside was worse than in. A low wind moved over the bowl, not a breeze, more like the air changing its mind all at once. The field bent and then straightened. Dust lifted into a thin curtain and hung. At the car, Mark beeped the unlock and nothing happened. He did it again. Nothing. He stuck the key in the door like we used to and opened it. The interior smelled like upholstery and warm rubber. He sat in the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine tried and then kept trying without success. He let go. He tried again. It did the same thing. The battery light came on and stayed on like it meant it. He said a sentence full of words and then hit the steering wheel once with the heel of his hand. Not hard, more like he was calling the car's attention. "Pop the hood," Cass said. She already had her hands out like she expected to need them. He popped it. We stood in the heat and looked at the engine in the way people do who don't really know what they're looking at. The belts looked like belts. Nothing smoked. Nothing dripped. No wire hung loose. I touched one thing because touching something made me feel less useless. It was warm and gritty. Mark tried the key again. The same almost start bird in the air and the same dead end. The dash light flicked and held. "Okay," Mark said, and looked up at the street like he expected a tow truck to be driving by on a day like this. "We can get the diner lady to call someone," Joy said. "She'll know a person." We turned to the diner door and found the paper sign now said closed, slid under the earlier lines. The fan in the window was off. Behind the glass, the chairs were up on the tables, and the floor was empty like it had been cleared fast. I had never before thought a closed diner could look like a person turning its face to the wall. "We walked to the gas station," Cass said. "It's not far." We went. We left the bags in the car because carrying them felt like saying we weren't coming back. The gas station door was open. No one was inside. A bell on the door didn't ring when we went in because there was no bell. The lights were on but dim. A radio behind the counter murmured in a voice that had lost its station. I called hello, and the sound just stuck to the racks of chips. On the counter sat a jar with a handwritten label that said, "Help us fix the ice machine," in thick black marker. The jar was empty. Behind the jar, a landline phone sat in its cradle. I reached out and then took my hand back. I didn't want to see what the landline did here when you asked it to call. "We can't stay," Joy said. She said it softly, like a secret. "We can't." "We're not staying," Mark said. "We are going to. Okay. We are going to walk up to the highway. We'll get service there, or someone will stop, or we'll flag down a truck. People still do that. We'll get a lift to the motel. We'll figure out the car tomorrow." "That's a lot of ore," Cass said. "It's a plan anyway," I said. "Let's go." We stepped back outside. The low wind had carried more dust into the air. It wasn't choking, just enough to make everything look faded. I could taste it on my tongue. We started walking up the street toward the road that would meet the main road. The houses along the block had that look some houses have where they're not empty, but you never see anyone go in or out. A curtain moved in one window, and then stilled. We reached the corner. The road that went out toward the highway was there like it should be, cracked and hot. We turned that way. The first few steps felt good because they were steps in the right direction. I looked back once because I am that person. From here you could see the phone pole on the slope, the small box halfway up it. The door was open. The handle hung at an angle. I could not see the thin lines from here, but I didn't need to. We walked. The heat pressed against our backs. The sound of the bugs carried this far. It sounded like they had learned new notes overnight. Every few minutes we took turns saying something cheerful, the way you feed yourself when you don't have any food left. "We're fine. We'll laugh about this. We'll be back in our own beds soon. It's a story." The words broke apart behind us like dry leaves. At the top of the rise where the road met the two-lane, we stopped. The highway sat empty in both directions. In the distance, heat made a low shimmer. No cars came, no trucks, no bikes. The day had that hush traffic always gives a place just by existing. It was gone now, and the quiet took up the space where it had been. "What if we cut across the top?" Joy asked. "There's that service road. It will get us to the dam. There has to be someone at the dam." "Good," Mark said. "Yes, let's do that." We followed the edge of the field that ran along the top of the bowl. Grass there kept a desperate hold on the earth with shallow roots. A fence made of posts and wire had fallen in one place, and we stepped over it. We moved as a group without saying that we were staying close. The service road showed itself as a pale stripe ahead. It looked like a promise. When we reached it, I felt a small flash of relief. The road had the right kind of gravel. The wheel ruts made sense underfoot. We walked toward the dam. The dam sat squat and simple in the distance, a block against the sky. I could see the chain link fence and the small sign that had warned about sudden water release. It had never looked like a friend before. It did now. Then the sound came. Not the bell, not the hum. A ringing thin and dry from below. It came in a short burst, then stopped, then again. We all turned at once. It wasn't close. It wasn't far. It was enough. "It's the box," Mark said. "Or a box." "We're not going back," Joy said. "We're not," Cass said. She was breathing with her mouth open. We stood in place and listened to the rings travel through the heat. They came from the direction of the slope, but not always the same place along it. Like there was more than one box now. Like the sound passed from one to the other. I looked down. The web of clear lines we had seen near the pole was bigger than I had thought. It ran far under the ground, showing in places where the surface was harder and hiding in places where the clay had been stirred. We took a step. Another. The dam got a little closer. The ringing went on. It wasn't fast or urgent. It was just there. It made me feel like a dog that wants to come when called, even if the voice is new. I thought about the notebook in the cooler, and the line that said it sometimes came from two directions at once. I tried to not think about how the lines might end. We reached the fence. The gate was locked. It had a number on it to call, and a warning about fines, and a sun-faded sticker with a cartoon fish wearing sunglasses. Beyond the fence, the concrete of the dam looked blank and stupid, which is not always a bad quality in an object that holds back a body of water. There was a small building to the right, with a door that had peeling paint. I shook the fence because that's what you do, even when you can see it won't help. The ringing rose behind us and then settled again. "Maybe there's a way around," Mark said. He moved left along the fence line. We followed. After 20 steps, Joy stopped. She squatted down and touched the ground. "It's in my fingers," she said. She stood. She looked at me. "I can feel it." I could too. A faint vibration under my shoes. A steady hum, not loud, not even sound really. More like a message the ground had learned to send and we had learned to hear. I put my palm flat on the gravel. The hum ran through it. It wasn't constant. It pulsed like a slow heartbeat. When it faded, I felt a small grief, and when it came back, a small relief. That scared me more than anything. I didn't want it. We tried the other direction. The fence went on to a corner where another fence met it. Behind that, a slope ran down to the base of the dam. The ground there looked soft. Footprints would hold there longer. The thought came without invitation and stayed. "No," Cass said. She said it in a quiet voice that had more weight in it than a shout. "No, we are not going down there. We are not going back down. We are not following any of it." Joy nodded hard. Mark shook the fence again and then let his hands drop. We stood at the corner like we were waiting for someone to come open it because we wanted it to be that simple. No one came. "Okay," Mark said finally, voice flat. We go back to the house. We sit on the porch. We wait. When a car comes through town, we flag it. If no cars come, we wait until the sun goes down because it has to cool off, and then we walk along the highway to the motel. We stick together. We don't touch any of the anything. We don't pick up a goddamn thing. "Deal," I said. Joy made a small sound that could have been a laugh if it had more breath in it. Cass looked at me and tilted her head a little like she was asking a question she didn't want to say out loud. I didn't know the answer. We started back. The ringing followed us in a lazy way, the way a sound follows you down a hall. It stayed behind and then came closer, and then fell back again, like it didn't care whether we listened. At the top of the bowl, we could see the slope and the last water and the phone pole. The box door was open. The crank hung. A ribbon had been tied to the pole since we last looked. It was white, and it twitched in the thin wind. I didn't like that someone else had tied it. I didn't like it more that the someone might not have been a person. Back at the house, we moved the bags inside again because we didn't want them sitting in the sun. The air felt thicker, as if the house had filled with breath while we were gone. We turned on the fan, and it clicked into motion, and then clicked back off. The hum inside the walls returned. It felt in the floorboards, in the cups in the sink, in the hollow space under the couch where dust lives. Cards? Joy asked. A joke and not a joke. Let's just sit, Cass said. She sat on the floor with her back against the couch and closed her eyes and let her head rest on the cushion behind her. Mark stood for a while, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, as if standing was a job and he was on call. I went to the kitchen. I opened the cooler again because I was going to put the notebook back, even though it wasn't mine and never had been, and because the last time I opened it, it had put something back I didn't like, and I wanted to give it one more chance to be a box for things. The notebook wasn't there. I pulled out the sunglasses, the bottle opener, the map. I took the cooler off the counter and turned it upside down. A few crumbs fell out and stuck to the counter with a wet eyelash line of water. No notebook. I stood there stupidly with the open cooler and felt a pressure in my chest that had nothing to do with heat or fear and everything to do with the exact feeling you get when you realize you left something on the roof of your car and drove off. Did one of you? I started, and then stopped. My mouth felt dry. Mark came to the doorway. What? The notebook, I said. It's gone. Cass sat up straight. What do you mean gone? I mean gone, I said. I mean not in the cooler. I mean I didn't take it anywhere else. I mean it was here, and then it wasn't. Joy stood. Don't be mad, she said, which is the sentence people say before they ask you to be mad. I looked at it. I didn't move it. I just looked. While you were checking the shed to see if there was rope, I put it back. I swear. I believe you, I said, and I did. The anger I felt wasn't at Joy. It wasn't even at the notebook. It was at the shape of the room now without it, the way the absence made the air feel different. A ring came from outside. It was louder than before, or we were quieter. The first ring came from the slope. The next one sounded closer. The next was closer still, behind the house, near the back steps. We froze. The ring after that came from the front porch. We all turned our heads toward the door the way animals do. The sound wasn't a bell anymore. It was more like a voice in a metal throat trying to clear itself. There was a soft knock. Not on the door. On the window next to it, the one by the couch. It was light. It didn't ask anything. It just made itself known. The house shifted a little on its foundation the way houses do in summer when heat makes wood talk, and the knock came again. Sheriff the plush dog slid off the arm of the couch and fell face down on the rug. No, Joy said. She said it to the room, to herself, to whatever had a hand to knock with. Another knock came from the kitchen window behind me, then one from the hallway, then one from the back door. Not a rhythm, not a pattern. Just a series of taps that said, "We are here. We have known these walls longer than you have." I thought about the thing that had brushed my knuckles in the trash can and felt sick in a simple way. "Basement," Mark said suddenly. "There has to be one. A crawl space, a panel. We take the flashlight and look. There'll be a breaker box down there. We can shut the whole house off. Maybe it will stop." He looked at me like he was asking permission to believe something might change if he did a chore. We found the panel behind a shelf in the hallway. It wasn't a big door, just a square with a flat handle that resisted at first and then gave with a sigh. A smell came up, damp and old and sour in a way that had nothing to do with wet wood. The hole was dark. The floor inside was dirt. Cobwebs hung in thin sheets. A small ladder was fixed to the inside of the opening down into the space. 8 rungs. The 4th one looked thicker than the others. Joy made a sound like a swallow went down wrong. "No," she said again. "I'll go," I said, because I could feel the part of Mark that wanted to go, and the part that wanted someone to stop him, and the way those parts were going to fight in his chest until one of them won. "Hold the light." He handed me his phone. I turned the flashlight on. The beam cut a narrow hole in the dark and filled it with dust. I put my foot on the first rung. It was solid. I put my weight on it. The wood held. The second rung was fine. The third creaked and then settled. The fourth, the thick one, didn't creak. It felt slick under my arch. I put my hand around the side rail and moved down. The space under the house opened out to a low chamber with ductwork and pipes, and the bodies of spiders curled like punctuation. The dirt had that hard crust on top with a soft look underneath. The flashlight beam found the breaker box on the far cinder block wall, a rectangle with a metal door held by a latch. I stepped off the ladder onto the dirt. It gave a little and then held. I kept the light pointed ahead and moved slowly, because this was not a place to fall. The hum inside the house sounded louder down here, even though I was below it and not inside it. It sounded not like one hum, but several slightly different hums in a loose braid. When I reached the box, I opened it. The switches sat in 2 columns. Some were labeled in pencil: kitchen, bath, AC. The writing had run in places. I looked at the main. I took a breath and then flipped it down. The house went quiet. Above me, the small knocks stopped. The hum slowed and then smoothed into nothing. There was a moment of silence that felt like someone had taken their hand off my head. I stayed still. The dirt under my shoes felt different, as if it had been holding a note and now let it go. Then I felt the other thing, not sound, movement. A small pulling in the soil under my left foot, like a muscle tensing. Then another under my right. The ground didn't sink. It flexed. I turned the light down. The beam showed lines in the dirt, thin and pale and almost white, running in curves. I had seen them before, out on the slope. Here they were closer, some on the surface, some just under, showing where the dirt was thinner. They ran under the ladder and around the cinder blocks and into the darkness under the far corner. They were not wires. They were not roots. They looked like what you would see if you cut through a body and stared long enough. I took a step back, and my heel pressed against something that wasn't dirt. I looked. It was the notebook. It lay there on the ground, plaid cover damp, pages slightly open. It looked like it had been set down, not dropped. I crouched and lifted it. The paper was cool. A page was folded. I opened to it. The same hand had written, "If the top stops, the bottom learns." Under that, the ladder drawing again, and at the side a small box with a little handle, a child's version of the crank. My mouth went dry. I stood and turned and got back on the ladder and climbed up. My hands shook. At the fourth rung, my foot slipped a little, and I caught myself on my knees and hit my shin hard enough to make white sparkles jump in my head. I kept going. I came out into the hallway with the notebook and put it down on the floor and shut the panel door and slid the shelf back in front of it, even though I knew that was like hiding something from yourself under your own bed. "What happened?" Cass asked. Her voice had that tight sound. "I turned it off," I said. Then the ground moved. I held up the notebook. "This was down there." Joy rubbed her arms like she was cold. "Put it back," she said. "Please put it back where it wants to be." "Where does it want to be?" Mark asked. He didn't look at the notebook. He looked at me like I had brought something into the room I should have left in the garage. "In the cooler," I said. "In the cellar. In the ground." Somewhere not here, I felt stupid, standing in a rental with a small book that somehow made every room feel smaller. "Okay," I said, and picked it up. "We'll go to the pole. We'll put it there. Then we'll come back and sit and wait for a car like a family in an advertisement." "Fine," Cass said. "Let's do it." We walked out the back door. The light seemed flatter than before, like the world had decided to be a picture. We cut through the field. The dry plants scraped our legs. The bugs had gone quiet, as if someone had turned their volume down. My skin prickled under my shirt. The notebook felt lighter than before, and that made me uneasy in a way that didn't make sense. At the pole, I reached up and held the notebook against the wood like I might tack a flyer there. "Lost cat. Reward." The box door was open. The crank hung. The thin lines ran from the back of the box out across the ground like fishing line pulled taut across a pond. I slid the notebook onto the small shelf under the box, where there must have once been a directory. It fit there as if it had been made to. I put the blue glass on top of it. I stepped back. We waited. The wind moved the white ribbon on the pole. The ribbon twisted once and then settled. The box didn't ring. It made a little click, not mechanical, more like the sound a throat makes when someone swallows. I had the sudden dumb fear that if we left now, the notebook would not stay. I picked up the blue glass, put it in my pocket, and then put it back on the notebook, because I didn't want anything in my pocket. I hated that I could feel the shape of fear settling into 100 small rules, and that I was going to follow them all. We walked back to the house. The car sat under the sun. A bird landed on the hood, and then lifted off again. The diner door sat closed. The sign lifted and fell. A truck turned onto the main road at the far end of town, and then went the other way. I watched it go, and felt something in me sag. On the porch, we sat. We didn't talk. Joy took Sheriff and put him between us like a line. Cass leaned forward with her elbows on her knees and looked at the ground as if there might be a solution drawn there in chalk. Mark cracked his knuckles and then stopped because the sound made him flinch. When the ringing started again, none of us moved. It came from the slope, and then from nearer, and then from the porch. Not loud, not even insistent. A thing in another room calling to itself. I told myself I would not get up. I told myself that even if the box got up and walked to the porch steps, I would not get up. I lasted longer than I thought I would. Then I stood. "Don't," Cass said without looking up. "I'm not going to answer it," I said. "I'm going to throw the notebook on the ground and stomp on it, and then light it on fire with a match I do not have, and then bury the pieces under the driveway." "That's not better," Joy said. "I know," I said. "I'm just saying things." I went down the steps. The field opened in front of me like a mouth. The sound of the ringing turned into the hum, and then back into the ringing again, as if it hadn't decided what it wanted to be. The pole stood out there like it had been placed for a purpose other than the one we gave it. When I reached it, the notebook was still there. The glass sat on top. I put my hand on the notebook. It was warm. I picked it up. I didn't know what I meant to do with it. I held it against my chest like a kid with a library book. The crank moved without my hand on it. Up, down, up. The box made that thin ring. I felt the vibration through my sternum like a word spoken against my skin. I had the mean thought that if I answered it, the sound would go away, and I could make the day quiet. And the kinder thought that if I didn't, I would always be standing under a different version of this pole in my head. I lifted the receiver. It wasn't heavy. It felt like holding the past. I put it to my ear. There was a sound, not static, not breath. It was like standing at the bottom of a stairwell and hearing several voices at once, different floors, different rooms. If I focused, I could pick out words. But as soon as I did, the words changed. Somebody said my name, my own name, the way my mother says it, and then the way Cass says it when she's mad, and then the way Mark does when he wants me to look at a thing, and then a voice I didn't know that sounded like mine from years back. I took the receiver away from my ear. The sound didn't stop. I put it back. Something on the ground under the pole moved in a small way, like a hand flexing. "I hear you," I said, which is the kind of thing people say when they don't have the word yes or no anymore. Behind me, feet on clay. I turned. Cass had come to the edge of the slope and stopped there. Her face looked like she had walked a long way and realized it was farther back than forward. She didn't say don't. She didn't say anything. She lifted her hand in a small motion, not reaching to me, more to the air, as if she could quiet it by smoothing it down. The voices in the receiver changed again. A man said, "You shouldn't take," in a tone someone uses when they say pass the salt. A child said, "Go back," in a way that made it sound like go home. Then a low voice came, a voice I could feel more than hear, that said, "You put the wrong things down." It didn't sound angry. It didn't sound like anything. It sounded like a rule. I thought about the coin in the crack of the slab, and about the blue glass, and about the chair in the cellar moved a few inches, and about the handprints on the back wall of the store, and about the lines under the house, and about the page that had said, "Hold your breath the second time." "What do you want?" I said. It felt stupid to ask the air a question. It felt worse not to. The voice didn't answer. The hum under my feet grew for a second and then fell back. The lines on the ground trembled and then went still. Inside the box, something clicked. The receiver got heavier. I held it with both hands. I thought about putting it back on its hook and walking away. I thought about throwing it as far as I could toward the last water. I thought about smashing the box with a rock until it was quiet metal. None of those thoughts felt like choices I could hold. In the end, I did the small thing. I put the receiver back on the hook. The box made a sound like a lid set on a jar. The ribbon on the pole twisted twice. The wind went through the grass and made it all bow the same way. "Come back," Cass said. "Please." I went. We walked to the porch together and sat. Mark looked at me and then away. Joy held Sheriff like a seatbelt. No one said what did it say because that implied there had been a conversation. There hadn't. There had been noise through metal. I felt tired in a way that had nothing to do with muscles. We waited. A car came down the main street. It was white and big and looked like the kind of vehicle that knows all the roads. Mark stood and waved. The car slowed a little and then kept going. The driver didn't look at us. He kept his hand on the top of the wheel like he didn't want to change his mind. Joy swore under her breath, which was new for her and made me want to hug her. The sun slid lower. The light turned from bright to not bright. The bugs came back to their song. The wind lost interest. The last water in the bowl looked like a piece of metal lay out on a table. The phone on the slope didn't ring. The lines under the ground didn't hum in a way I could feel. An ordinary evening tried to assemble itself from parts. "We can walk now," Cass said. "It will be cooler." We stood. We took nothing. We left our bags by the sofa like that little bit might matter. Like if someone came through the house after we were gone, they would know we meant to return to this place and then couldn't. We locked the door because habit is a strong muscle. We stepped onto the porch. The porch light blinked once and then stayed off. On the way past the pole, I didn't look. We climbed to the top of the bowl. We turned onto the road. We started toward the highway. The air felt different. Not better. Not worse. Different. Like the room after someone stops playing a song. We walked. A mile, 2. The sky went from light to that in-between color. A car came from the far end, and this time it slowed all the way. A man leaned out the passenger window. He was middle-aged and had the kind of face that looks like it should belong to someone's uncle. He asked if we needed a lift, and when we said yes, he said where to. And we said the motel by the highway with the green sign. And he said sure, and we got in. And for the first time that day, the inside of a machine made me feel safe. He smelled like motor oil and coffee. He asked what had happened, and we told him the short version. He said it sounded like a battery issue, and a heat issue, and a luck issue. He said it happened to his cousin last summer, when the river got low, which didn't explain anything, and also explained enough. At the motel, the rooms had thin spreads and heavier curtains. The air conditioning worked. The TV made familiar shapes. The clerk at the desk had a collection of keychains and told us which fast food joints still had fries this late. When he handed us the keys, he said, "You folks from over by the lake?" We said yes. He said, "Don't take anything," like a joke, and then laughed and told us where the ice machine was, and his laugh stayed in the air even when we had walked out of it. In the room, the 4 of us stood for a second and didn't know what to do with our bodies. Then we did what people do in rooms. We threw ourselves on beds and stared at the ceiling and let the TV run without listening, and took showers and left damp towels on racks. When it was my turn for the shower, I stood under the water too long and let my skin wrinkle. When I came out, Mark was sitting on the bed staring at nothing with his hands on his knees. Joy was asleep with the remote on her chest. Cass stood by the window with her fingers under the curtain like she was checking a pulse. "You okay?" I asked. "Sure," she said. "We're at a motel." "Everything is fine at motels?" "You sound like yourself," I said, and it came out wrong. She made a face and then smoothed it away. In the middle of the night, I woke. I didn't know why at first. Then I heard it. A ring, thin and dry and short. It came from the wall, from inside the lamp, from the metal rack where you hang shirts. It came from the air. It wasn't loud. It wasn't a noise anyone else in any other room would have woken for. I lay there and listened to it come and pause and come again. After a while, it stopped. In the quiet, I could hear the air conditioner breathe. I told myself that the sound had been the ice machine down the hall. I told myself lots of good news. We went back the next morning with a tow truck. The driver hooked the car up and frowned and then tried the key, and the engine turned on like nothing had happened. He shrugged and said, "Heat sometimes plays tricks." He said if it were him, he'd still let him haul it to the shop for a look. Mark said, "Do it." We followed him there in the tow truck cab and signed papers and sat on a plastic couch that squeaked and waited for the mechanic to say words. He said battery and connection and replaced and you'll be fine. We paid. It felt like a ceremony. Back at the house, we did what the binder asked. We stripped beds and gathered towels and wiped the counters and put the mugs we had bought on the shelf with the others, like a dumb message to future renters that said we were here. We played house. The cooler sat on the counter. The sticker said, "Take only what you need." I opened it with 2 fingers on the lid. Inside lay the sunglasses, the bottle opener, the map. The notebook was not there. The blue glass was not there either. I searched the drawers, under the couch, the back of the closet, the edge of the bed, because once you think you've lost a thing, you become a person who looks in places you know won't help. Nothing. We carried the trash to the bin behind the diner. The bin lid was up. Inside, I saw the fly from the kitchen crawling on the white side of a burger box, alive in a way that made me feel ridiculous for being glad for it. I shut the lid. We stood on the porch one last time. The slope lay out there under the sun. The lines didn't show in the daylight. The pole looked like what a pole looks like when you want it to be a pole. The last water was a dull slice. The ribbon on the pole was gone. In its place was nothing at all. We got in the car. The engine started. The air blew. Mark said the thing you say when machines work. Good. He didn't say anything about how he had stood in the living room with his hands on his knees. He put the car in gear. We drove away. On the highway, the world resumed. Trucks passed. People in convertibles had hair that did what hair does in convertibles. Billboards told us what to buy. None of it felt like it had been waiting for us or would notice if we were gone. A part of me resented that. Another part took the weight off. Back in the city, we returned to our loops. Mark texted about a new place to eat where the burgers came with small flags. Joy sent a photo of Sheriff sitting on her windowsill like he had his own lease. Cass wrote me that she had thought about calling and then didn't, and then thought about it again, and then didn't again. And then here she was writing me. And wasn't that the same thing? I wrote back yes. And then we didn't see each other for a week, because people are cowards when they are tired and when they aren't. At night sometimes I hear it. Not often. Not like then. Once, in the middle of a movie when the sound went quiet so a character could think, I heard a thin ring under the score. Once, in my apartment when the radiator picked up and laid down, I heard it in the clink. Once, on a bus, I felt it in my teeth the way a headache starts. Those times, I think of the cooler and its sticker, and the letter from the man who had walked by and said not to take anything, and the woman in the diner who wouldn't repeat the words, and the ladder on the wall, and the wrong rung, and the little box, and the rule that had no owner. I haven't gone back. I don't plan to. I look at maps sometimes and see the white space where the reservoir sits, and click the satellite and see the color of late summer on it, and the way the shoreline cuts in and out like a jaw. I tell myself it could be anywhere. Any lake drops sometimes. Any town gets tired. Any house hums. Any phone rings. I tell myself this, and sometimes it helps, and sometimes it doesn't. Last week I got a small package with no return address. Inside was a postcard. The picture showed the reservoir from the Goodyear, blue and bright, the jet ski cutting the white V. On the back, a few words in small, tight handwriting. It's not what you take. It's who, no name. No other message. I held the card and didn't put it down right away. I didn't throw it away either. It's on my fridge now under a magnet shaped like a state I've never been to. Every time I open the door to get milk, I see it there and think about how a sentence can keep doing its job after it leaves the mouth that made it. Sometimes I take the magnet off and read it again, and then put it back and make sure the magnet sits flat, like that matters. I dream of the cellar once in a while. In the dream, the ladder has only 7 rungs. The thick one is gone. I wake with the feeling you get when you almost fall and catch yourself on a rail. I lie there in the dark and listen to the building. It creaks. Pipes knock. The neighbor's door shuts. Somewhere far away, a train goes through a crossing and sings its big note. In that space after the note, if I'm honest, I listen for something thinner and meaner. The small ring. The little click of a box closing. The sound of a person putting the receiver back on the hook. I don't answer anything that sounds like that. I don't pick up unknown numbers. I don't stop for white ribbons tied to fences. I don't keep glass from beaches anymore. I try not to take even when people say it's fine. I don't know if any of that matters to a place like that. I don't know if any of it matters to anything. On a hot day this week, the kind where the air presses your face with its open palm, I stood on my fire escape at dusk and watched a thunderhead build to the west and then slide north like it had an appointment. It looked like rain, maybe, and it didn't rain. The air smelled like wet electric anyway. The metal rail was hot under my hand. A kid across the alley yelled at a video game. Somewhere in my building a phone rang. Not a cell. An old one. It had that dry sound. It went 3 times. The person on the other side answered. I listened to my neighbors be human through thin walls. Nothing else came. I went inside and shut the window. I set a glass on the counter. I ran the tap and let it go a second because sometimes it comes out brown and then clears. I took one drink and then another. On the fridge, the postcard looked like a picture of a place I had never been. The jet ski made its neat cut. The sky over it was a blue that belongs to photos. I put my hand flat on the cold metal of the fridge door and waited for the hum to kick on. When it did, I felt it in my teeth, and I laughed a little because I'm still here. And once in a while, when I close my eyes just before sleep, and my mind wants to show me its small films, I see the 4 of us in the yard, in that light, with that heat, looking out over the bowl. I see the pole and the box and the little shelf where a book sat that did not belong to any one person. I see the way Cass looked at me without blinking, The way Joy held the stuffed dog like some simple thing could tip a balance. The way Mark tried to find a joke in a room with no jokes in it. I see the last water holding still. I see the lines under our feet like a body diagram. I see how quiet everything was. And I hear how loud. When I wake from that one, it only takes a second to remember I'm not there. I turn on a light like a normal person does when they've had a bad dream. I tell myself what I always tell myself. It was just a place, and we were just people. Then I wait for the part of me that knows that's not all to get quiet again. And when it does, I go back to sleep.